Begin. So hello, everyone. I'm Clayton Smith, Chair of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee of Community Board 5. We have a couple of items on the agenda tonight. Please be reminded that no position of the board is official until the full board meets a week from Thursday. Those meeting details, as always, are on cb5.org, and we invite you to attend. We will begin with our voting item, which is from the Madison Square Park Conservancy with an event application. So I think we had Barbara and Mike looking at this. Would you guys like to kick us off?
Okay, since it's a little quiet. I don't know, is Mike here?
Well, I thought I saw him a second ago, but he seems
to he's right there. This is a pretty simple event. It's sort of an unusual one. It's a big ice sculpture in the park in the shape of a pocketbook. It's, I think Madison Square Park could probably give a fuller explanation, but it's pretty limited in scope to one area of the park, and I think the impact won't be tremendous on other people. But I'll turn it over to the park to explain it a little more fully.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Oops, apologies. Still getting the hang of this months later. So I'm really excited to present this ice sculpture installation that we're having here in the park. This actually was something that was presented to us right after we met in January. So I'm really excited to be presenting it to you today. So the Italian fashion brand Bottega Veneta is interested in building an ice sculpture on the gravel area in Madison Square Park. This ice sculpture is 10 by 4 by 10, and I'll explain the dimensions again once we get to the picture. But it is a ice sculpture that would be placed prominently in the southern half of the park in the gravel area of the park. Specifically because of the scale of it, we broke it up into 2 overnights per the Parks Department's request, and that was specifically because they want vehicles to only enter the park during non-public hours. So that confines us to the 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. time slot. And we also didn't want the assembly of the blocks and the ice carvers to bleed into the morning where people could potentially happen upon it, post it to Instagram that this really cool ice carving is happening in the park, and then have any potential crowd gathering issues. So for this very reason, we're proposing the schedule of Thursday, February 11th. The truck and the forklift would come in at 11 p.m., move the pre-cut ice blocks to the gravel area, assemble them onto a water catchment tray. So if there's any melt, it would be caught onto that. And then they would be cemented essentially using water, which would then fuse the blocks into a very solid rectangular shape. Those would then be covered up and barricaded for the evening, for the morning unto the daytime. And then the carvers would return on that Friday, so a couple hours later at 7 p.m. to begin carving the ice sculpture and detailing it. And we noticed that a lot of people don't seem to be in the park during the evening hours. It's a little too cold, and it's right during dinner. So we don't anticipate any kind of real crowd gathering at this point. And this also actually positions us in a good place to address any kind of noise issues. We can minimize the disruption by doing a lot of the electric cutting and power tool cutting before 10 p.m. And then kind of just finish up whatever needs to get done before 6 a.m. And we expect to be out there before 6 a.m., the final deadline. The ice sculpture would then open up to the public on February 13th, which is the Saturday, and it would just be on view to the public all the way to Thursday, the 18th. On Thursday, the 18th in the evening, whatever ice would remain, and with the weather that we're currently having, I think there'll be quite a bit of ice remaining. They will then cut up, load out onto the trucks, and that would be it. It would just disappear as if it was just here for a magical period of a couple of days. So in terms of staffing, there is no interactive component. It is very low impact. People can just wander upon the sculpture and enjoy it. There will be 2 security guards stationed for the entire period of the event, so 24 hours. They do have stanchions available to limit crowd interaction if it happens. So if anyone is attempting to climb it or potentially going to interact with it in a manner that could destroy the ice sculpture, they can easily deploy those around the sculpture and the security guards can intervene. But honestly, I know they had other sculptures in different parks and I think it'll be pretty safe. We actually did something similar to this on a much smaller scale about 2 years ago around the reflecting pool. So ice sculpture itself, again, is a large rectangle of 10 by 4 by 10. So 10 feet in length, 4 feet in width, and 10 feet in height. This is when it's assembled in the pre-cut blocks, not when it's detailed into carving. It will actually shrink in size. It will be placed on a catchment tray. So if there is any melt water, it will not go onto the ground and cause any slip hazards, things like that. We have it currently built in where if it is to be illuminated, the spotlights would be soft spotlights to reflect onto the sculpture and would be powered by a portable generator. As of today, the lighting has kind of fallen off of the plan, but I'm just including it on the off chance that it does come back on. But it would be very minimal lighting. It would be ambient, nothing more than, definitely not a Christmas tree amount of lights in the park. That being said, the ice sculpture will be exposed to the elements. There is no any artificial cooling to keep it in ice form. But like I said, I think with the weather being what it is in February, we'll be pretty lucky. Because of the shape of it, the melt should be fairly even, and it is a very strong shape in general. And also, if there is significant melting or things like that, we do have, for example, an MSPC person, the 2 security guards on site, and then Okamoto Studios will actually have someone come and check it throughout the day. So there'll be a lot of redundancies built in to make sure that the integrity of the ice sculpture is in place. If we do feel like the ice sculpture could potentially be compromised, we will then address the issue or if necessary, disassemble it. And that's already built into the agreements with the client. So again, this ice sculpture is positioned in the southern end of the park. So you can see here, this is the fountain, the circle on top. And then to the right of us is the Shake Shack. So the ice sculpture is closest to the gravel, parallel to Broadway. And that's where the ice sculpture will be positioned during this time. And again, they do have the catchment tray, a nice solid area to kind of survey the sculpture itself and security guards on site during this time. Again, no giveaways, very minimal interaction. They will have one photographer, professional photographer, upon the completion of the sculpture, taking a photo of it. If we need to deploy those signs that say, hey, if you're walking in this area, be advised you might be photographed, we will have those. But for the most part, it's just of the sculpture itself, not anticipating any foreground shots, background shots of anyone inside of it. And this would most likely take place in the very early morning hours of Saturday upon its completion. So I think that's pretty much it. I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Thank you, Barbara and Mike. I know you guys had some initial questions. Did you get those answered for yourselves?
We did. I just wanted to ask though, I did. I don't know if Mike felt he got his questions answered. I thought they were answered. But the security guards are 24 hours? Yeah,
so they'll have multiple teams. So it's not the same security guard for 24 hours. That'd be kind of cruel. But he will be guarded during a 24-hour period by shift of 2 security guards per shift.
I just, you just get nervous somebody's going to climb it or something like that. So
exactly. And because of the shape of it, that's why we preferred 2 security guards to 1, because you can have one side position and be able to see 2 sides at all points, and then have those stanchions to secure the area. If people start, we've got teenagers and rowdy adults and things like that, easily deploy them to prevent any kind of climbing or things like that. But I feel pretty confident with the security plan.
Yeah, I walk through the park a lot. I don't live that far, and I agree that at 7, once it gets dark, except for a few people going to walk their dogs through the park, it's really quite quiet. And Shake Shack, that's pretty much it. So, I think doing the ice sculpture is not going to attract a lot of people. One thing to add also is that there's no sound component to this either.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, there is no sound component.
And you did also confirm, right, about signage, that there's basically nothing aside from the ice itself.
Yeah, so the name of the brand Bottega Veneta is going to be specifically carved into the ice sculpture itself. There's no additional signage.
Great.
You
And
put that,
Mike,
could you
did
put that, yeah. Would you put that mock-up back, the picture?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. There you go. So this is not the exact placement of where it would be because it's a flat dimension picture, but.
So I wanted to ask about, you said that there's a catchment tray. Did I get
Yes.
that?
So this
doesn't.
tray is not the one that actually would be installed.
Okay, and there are lights built into this one, right?
Yes. So the tray is being fabricated right now, but basically it's kind of just a large, almost like serving platter type tray that would catch any melt in it, and it would be empty.
Now, how close will people be able to, will they be able to touch it kind of thing? Will they keep them away? What's the,
Sure. So the plan right now is that people can interact with it. They can, look at it if they wanted to touch it. But if, they sense that someone is going to, you would really have to take like a bat, I would assume, to it to really destroy it because it's just made of pretty much solid ice. And again, the shape is a rectangle, so it's extremely strong. I think, the security guards they would hire would know to identify it. If people did start climbing at them, they would be immediately asked to leave, and they would then deploy the stanchions around it. The idea is that they want to let people enjoy it, take photos with it without any kind of, with minimal disruptions. But if people do intend to engage in activity that is disruptive, they can easily address that.
Thanks.
I just had a question about, this is obviously pretty low impact as far as all the parameters we always look at, but personally, I do like the fact that the lighting seems to have fallen off just because I don't know why I keep wanting to laugh. I don't know if ice sculptures are like inherently funny or something, but the idea of like an illuminated ice sculpture to me feels just really funny. And I think it's going to be better without lights. But is there some reason why the lighting fell off in particular? And what do you actually think are the chances of that coming back?
It was mainly an aesthetic issue. Again, a lot of this is aesthetic issues that they want people to be able to take a photo of it. And it's just like this magical thing you wander upon that doesn't feel, the lights itself make it feel artificial. So it's almost like, especially with the snow we have on the ground, it just like magically rose up. At least that's how the creative team really likes to pitch it, is this magical ice sculpture that just appeared one day. So to kind of remove all those elements that create artifice away from it. So that's the main reason why the lighting fell off.
It's an ice sculpture of a handbag. It's apparently artificial, but it's whatever. I mean, as we said, it minimizes the impact. So it's kind of works. I think it works for the, for us.
I agree, especially because of the lack of a generator always just is a nicer touch. Miriam, you have a question. Miriam, I see you have your hand raised, but you need to unmute yourself. Maybe you're having technical difficulties.
Yeah, it looks like her audio isn't connected.
Oh, okay. Miriam, we see that you're here, but it looks like for some reason you are not connected to your audio. So if you want to, you can drop your question into chat and I can relay it. In the meantime, does anyone else, there's somebody else with a hand raised. Todd.
Okay, so I think an ice sculpture with no sound, minimal lighting, and security guards has got to be among the least intrusive and most benign of these commercial events that we've seen in a while. So, if we have to have these, I think that this is a model of restraint and responsibility. And, an ice sculpture of handbags that gradually melts over a week, I have no issue with it.
Thank you, Todd. I will see if Miriam wants to ask her question. In the meantime, I will also open the floor to members of the public. If any members of the public have any questions or comments on this application, please use the raise hand feature and we will hear from you.
If you're joining us from a phone, you can press *9 to indicate that you'd like to speak.
Miriam's question is if there is a rendering of what the finished visual will be.
So this is the bag itself is a finished visual. The catchment tray is the only piece that is currently being fabricated right now. So the catchment tray that you see here is not what actually will exist in the park on day of, but the sculpture itself.
But you did mention that this is more of the ice blocks, not the actual sculpture.
Yeah, so the ice blocks itself, on the very first day when we load in, the ice blocks will be brought into the park, and it will be just a giant rectangle.
But this is the actual sculpture.
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is post sculpting.
That's a bag.
Yes, post sculpting. Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Got it. Miriam, this is your frozen bag right here.
I think it's like a quilted bag, maybe.
Yeah, it's a woven bag. So if you want to, after this, you can go to their website and see what the actual bag looks like in yellow.
Which they would love, of course. That would be the whole point.
I will actually. It shows you ignorance about handbags.
Miriam, let's see if you have any other follow-ups, feel free to type those in. And let me just check members of the public. Looks like no raised hands. So we have one more. Noah.
Yes, hi. My question is there a certain I don't know what the right word is, but is there some sort of plan of how people can come and see it, and a certain kind of COVID plan?
Like for queuing?
Place, yeah, for
so
queuing, leaving.
Yeah, I can address that. So specifically at this time, the plan is really to deploy the stanchions as people start to gather. We are noticing people coming into the park right now, and for the most part during the morning hours and evening hours, it's not very much in use. And then basically when it is very busy in the park, they can use those stanchions to create space around it. And the security guards, they will have one on one side and the other security guard is at the front who can then tell people to wait in line and whatnot.
I have to say, I think it's a walk-by event. It's not, there's nothing happening that would make a crowd gather. So the main purpose of this is so they can take social media photos.
Yeah.
It's a photography stage set.
Yep. I think even though Todd didn't bring this up, which was somewhat shocking, I think we probably would want you to have that language on the day that the photographer's there, and that we love the language that doesn't scare people away.
Yep.
Just in case anyone wonders what it is the photographer's doing or whatever, it's just better to cover your bases that way.
Absolutely, agreed.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other raised hands, and I am taking the liberty of reading the freezing temperature of the room to assume that there are not overt objections to this application. So barring any additional comments or questions, I would like to hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, let's take it to a vote. Craig?
Okay, Clayton.
Yes.
Craig is yes. Dave.
Yes.
Miriam. Oh, Miriam, I can't. Just if you can put something in the chat room, Miriam, but I'm assuming yes. Chris.
Yes.
Aaron.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Will.
Yes.
Sam.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Kim.
Yes.
Evan.
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
Barbara.
Yes.
Daniel.
Yes.
Noah.
Yes.
And Miriam noted yes in the chat box. An enthusiastic yes.
Great.
So
Thank
motion
you.
passes.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for your presentation, and we look forward to seeing the ice bag. Or I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you, and everyone stay safe and warm over the next couple of days.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, we have a discussion about SAPO's proposed new rules for the open culture program. Kim, I wonder if you have some familiarity with this now and could just kind of give us a spiel. We did try to get somebody from CECM or SAPO to attend, but it was kind of last minute, and I don't believe that we have anyone, although if there is someone here, please, of course, make yourself known. But otherwise, Kim, can we hear from you?
Absolutely. And perhaps this would be an opportunity for us to compile a list of questions and thoughts around what's being proposed. So the open culture program would allow eligible art and cultural institutions or cultural venues to use approved open public street space for artistic or cultural events. Similar concept to that of open restaurant outdoor dining program that was launched last year. There will be an application fee of $20 for participation in the program to cover the costs and also to discourage frivolous applications. The program would be established beginning March 1st, 2021 and remain in effect until October 31st with the possibility of extension, but with like a final expiration of March 31st, 2022. It's being developed by a bunch of agencies from SAPO to the Mayor's Office of Event Coordination to the DOT to the DOB to the NYPD to the Fire Department and so on. I believe that today was a deadline in terms of the DOT being required to share a list of spaces eligible for the program, but I was not able to find any such document, so I'm unsure where that got submitted. But just recognizing that like this is a way to bring life back to the city and would allow artists and art groups to start staging performances and to be able to charge for them. And so, you know, the idea is that they'll be dancing and singing and comedy in the streets in a safe way. And this is a creative avenue for us to do that. I don't have a lot of detail like where the open streets that would be applicable would be. It clearly is different in concept than the restaurant program in that it's not going to be space that's like completely directly adjacent to a theatrical venue or office or something like that. So it's not the street space attached to your building. Another thing I should mention in the bill, there's some extremely loose language around around establishing guidelines that SAPO would be required be overseeing certain event elements yet to be determined, activities that might require additional agency permits. They also will be establishing guidelines in regards to limits on the frequency of events from a single applicant or sponsor to ensure that numerous applicants and sponsors are able to utilize the program. And so I think in that case, they're looking at the concentration of events in certain neighborhoods and, you know, equitable access to all groups. Not a lot of information given on like how that will come to be. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I mean, there's a lot of detail around like what's defined as an art and cultural institution, what constitutes a cultural venue, an open culture event, etc. And it's not to be confused with something that would be like a parade or a construction permit. It's very specific. It won't be obstructing the regular use of like a throughway or vehicular traffic. I can't think of like anything else that I've been able to glean that would be of importance to share.
Thanks, Kim. That's great. I think you're right that this is a good opportunity for all of us to just see whatever questions and topics we don't know enough about or have further questions about, and we can try to get those answered. We obviously won't be able to get those answered during this meeting, but that is why we're here. And one thing that I did want to share, the document that shows the proposed rules that you guys saw, which is public information, shows underlined text being additions to the proposed city rules. And those existing city rules are rules that govern pedestrian plazas and a lot of the spaces that SAPO manages and that we talk about all the time. And one difference that you may have noticed with the open culture program is that the amount of time that an applicant has to submit the application prior to the date of the event is 5 days. So as opposed to commercial events and pedestrian plazas that you guys recall used to be 14 days and are now different, 21 to, depending on the size of the event. We've gained traction with the city getting more advance notice of some of those events. This is 5 days. And so very clearly, I believe that is by design, not to make it onerous or difficult for the applicants. So I'm not saying that we have a problem with that. This is obviously a very different type of use and activation. So it's completely different. But I did want to point out to everyone that you can think of this program being executed in an analogous way to how we see events being applied for in pedestrian plazas. And, that's good and that's bad. There's not tons of transparency around that. We won't have any kind of easy way to know what's coming. So if we have any thoughts or questions about that, we can certainly reflect that to the city. Yes, Craig.
Sorry.
Thanks. Is there a sense as to a time limit in the evening that this will end? The reason why I'm asking is I know in PSQL, we've gotten at least one complaint where with the open streets for restaurants, that the restaurants one of the restaurants was attracting mariachi bands and comedians, etc., that were going on to like 10 or 11 o'clock at night or even past that. And there were residents on the block. So that obviously became problematic. And, the restaurants eventually pulled back, but initially when we intervened, when Luke intervened, but the initial response from the restaurant was, well, we really can't do anything and they're creating business for us anyway, so we kind of want it. Something to that effect. I'm sort of paraphrasing it. But and I don't expect an answer because I don't think we would know the answer, but what would be the protections for residents on a specific block to not be, quite frankly, disturbed when they have kids going to sleep at 8, 9 o'clock to have a band playing at 11 o'clock?
Yeah, Kim, I don't think there are any hours specified, are there, in the rules?
No, there's nothing specified. I had that same question. I also think it's
just one other thing. Sorry, just one other thing related to that, Kim, is what is the notification to the residents on that block? Because if they constantly have, there might be a limit on, ABC Corporation or ABC Traveling Group having 5 events on one block, but there may not be a limit of 5 events on one block, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You sort of have to spread the wealth. I live on a block with a museum on it, and I can see them wanting to shut the street or having performances or several days a week. And I don't think the residents on my block would particularly care for that. And it has to be a balancing act, of course, but what is that balancing act? And again, I don't expect an answer. It's just sort of for discussion purposes.
Yeah, great questions.
Certainly great questions. And I do have some concerns about, this is a balancing act. I am all for making it as not easy as possible, but as simple as possible so that it doesn't just become like yet another bundle of red tape and difficulties so that nothing would actually occur. But at the same time, what are the safeguards? Who's paying attention? And one question that I have too is who is looking at the competing uses when marketing events do start to come back to pedestrian plazas in warmer weather and that type of thing? Who's facilitating the conversation with the bids that might be responsible for that space or a business in front of that space? There's nothing in the rules about how that would be managed. And we do have some experience with pedestrian plazas and SAPO's management that basically they're just like, trust us, we can handle it. And we don't really know what the system is. And when it comes to who applies and when, they have a kind of First Amendment, put their hands up thing. Like, well, they applied for the permit, so they get it. And these rules seem to claim now that SAPO has a little bit more wherewithal to choose who and when and the density and the frequency and that type of thing. And so that's something else I have a question about. Like, well, for all these years, why could you not control the events because you claim that anybody has a right to have one? But all of a sudden, if it's arts, you have control over it. Why does any arts organization not be able to claim the same First Amendment right to do whatever they want in that space? So I'm a little bit confused as to the city's legal reasoning about it. And again, I don't really have a problem with it, but it just confuses me what they're basing it on and how we're going to see it carried out. Barbara, you have your hand raised.
Also, how do they propose controlling crowds? I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, one is just the crowd itself, but the other is if they're planning to charge, how do you, I mean, if it's an outdoor event and, you know, people can listen to music, you know, how are you going to control, you know, why would somebody pay if you could just overhear it? And then what happens if something's, so you limit the number of tickets that you're selling, but that doesn't necessarily limit people just hanging out and listening to whatever performance it is or watching the dance. I mean, you're not going to be carting around screens so people can't see the dance performance. I mean, I don't, you know, it's logistically, I mean, I am all for it as well. I mean, I spent part of my career designing theaters, and it's really terrible what's going on with the performing arts due to the pandemic. I really feel for everybody, but it's a little hard to really understand how all of this is going to be managed.
Yeah, agreed.
I can, but you know.
Yeah, and it is. I did read that obviously this doesn't trump. Oh my God, you can't use the word Trump anymore. This doesn't trump existing rules about gatherings of 50 people. So no matter what happens, the 50 people or less, including the artists, is mandatory. And yeah, Barbara, to your question, like, what does that mean? Or does that mean stanchions and security and
well, and then telling people you can't stop here and listen, and you know you have to keep moving on the sidewalk. I mean, it's a little weird. So I think maybe it has certain things have to be in a big enough area where there can be better dispersion, you know, among people. But you know that could put a lot of burden on certain park spaces and things like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Other questions or thoughts from anyone in the committee? Please feel free to use the raise hand feature. Yeah, Todd.
Clayton, did I hear you say that they can apply for this and there's only a 5-day notice, a 5-day period? So, I mean, in regular times, what is the period again? I mean, we always thought that was way too short, and that for the larger or more unusual or novel events, we rarely have time to comment or give feedback. I mean, am I missing something there?
You are not missing anything. I think the concern is
so we all understand that what we would agree to and permit in an emergency situation where, you know, our arts community is struggling, just like with the restaurants, is way different than what we would allow in ordinary times. But there's got to be some way. I mean, my concern is, and this again goes to what I've observed in the neighborhood about the restaurants and what I've heard, is that with the best of intentions, like with the singers coming out until all hours of the night, I mean, the function that we have, which is that with all of our experience hearing all these different types of events, if we hear about it, we can give some feedback to the bids and the people that may be doing this in a positive way. I mean, can't we make some comment that for events of a certain size or a certain type, that, you know, maybe there should be a longer notice period and give us a chance to say something, right? I mean, it seems like, you know, even though it's an emergency, we should take some care for some types of events to give some feedback.
You know, Kim asked a question, and I'm now looking at the document, and I realize I totally misunderstood. There's 2 separate rules and 2 separate deadline things specified here, and I totally misread this. So Kim, you're right. It's 15 days, actually. 15 days is the notice. So I apologize for being completely wrong in this whole conversation. But I was like, where did I get 5? And later in the document, I see notification of the approval of the application shall be made within 5 days of the application. So that was what I was misreading. So when you do apply, you will learn within 5 days if you are approved or denied. but the deadline is 15 days prior to the event. So my apologies, everyone. That is certainly a little bit better. But Todd, to your question about why the difference, I think it's just because typically speaking, the commercial events are the ones that we always were so incredibly worried about. And that's what we wanted time to be able to weigh the impacts. And I think there's just so much more willingness to see this program help arts institutions and performing artists and also the public who will benefit from it, that they're trying to just make it simpler and less onerous. 15 days is certainly better, but I think that's their thinking, although we didn't hear that from them. I'm just assuming that. Craig, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just on Todd's point, realistically though, there could be so many of these events. I don't see how any community, not just CB5, but any community board could potentially weigh in on all of these. I mean, as you know, Clayton, how many events are there that we don't weigh, like the weddings and stuff like that, that we theoretically could? I mean, I guess I think you have to go into like Kim's computer in the office and look at, every event. But realistically, there could be 100 of these events a month, right? I mean, thinking about it. And I don't know that we have the manpower, the people power, to be perfectly honest, to look at all these events. I mean,
well,
that's something that we should think about.
Yeah, Marissa, I'm wondering if, because I know you've had some conversations or some awareness about how the spaces are going to be chosen. And there is some kind of system about, it's not as if if I understand correctly, it's not as if we're just going to learn all of a sudden that a whole brand new public space is going to have an open culture event. There will be kind of areas that will be used for them. And I think that we're going to see that being rolled out. I really am not sure if that's right, but that's kind of my understanding right now.
As I understand it, you need to sort of utilize the current Open Streets program. So the institution, they're going to prioritize institutions that are near or on a current open street. So, it's already a street that people understand is differentiated from others somehow. So that's the only thing that I've really seen. It doesn't mean that they couldn't expand the current open streets, and they have talked about doing that as the weather warms up. I don't know if Community Board 5 had any say in that. I know Uptown, there was not much input from the community on what open streets they chose, and it was often problematic. But
I think Marissa just froze, or is it me?
No, it's her.
No, she froze.
So for example, I think I would imagine that 46th Street would be a likely place that we might, oh yeah, Marissa, you're back. So I'd imagine that 46th Street, for example, might be a block that we could expect to see some applications for these events.
yeah, sorry, my internet's not very stable right now. But no, just to say that any institution can use an open street. They're going to prioritize they're going to prioritize events from institutions to their closest open street.
Okay. Let's see if we have any questions or comments from members of the public. If you have anything you'd like to share or ask about this topic, please feel free to use the raise hand feature. And in the meantime, anyone else on the committee, I think we've outlined a lot of top level questions we have about this program. So we will work on putting that into communication with SAPO and trying to get some answers for everyone. I know that the hearing for these rules is on February 26th. If anyone wants all the different details about the hearing, that is in the very first page of the document that we shared with you. That information is all public on the city's website. But if you need any help with that, you can contact the board office. You can also mail or email written comments, of course, and the deadline for that is February 26th. So we will try to get that information out separately so that everyone knows it. I think it's important for us to ask these questions because clearly, if you are a resident of one of these blocks, you would want to know. And there'd be a lot of people interested in having a little more information about how this is going to get carried out. Marissa, I'm very curious to know if the existing database for what we see of street fairs, et cetera, on your computers will just explode exponentially with open culture events, which will make it even harder to parse through the mountain of data that we already can barely make sense of.
Yeah, one other thing I want to point out, maybe for consideration, is the issue we have around open restaurants and open streets is often around enforcement and the coordination between the agencies. It's unclear to the agencies themselves who's supposed to be enforcing what. And the 311 system doesn't really recognize these new programs. They don't know how to funnel complaints. So you might want to keep that in mind in terms of your comments. It's just to have a very clear sort of tree of enforcement.
I think that's a really good point, especially because there are so, unlike the commercial events in public spaces, this very explicitly involves so many different agencies that, I mean, no matter what agency you might be employed by, I would look at those rules and be like, well, whose job is whose here? So yeah, I think that will have to go into our comments. All right, everyone, let me know if you have any other questions or comments about this. Raise your hand and we will let you know what we learn. We are not voting on this, so that is the last agenda item of the evening. So unless anybody has anything else you'd like to ask or share, we will adjourn momentarily. I'll give it a second. Also, existing board members, if you haven't already and your term is up, they have extended the deadline to re-up for your community board membership to February 22nd. So get those in if you haven't already and your term is up. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Stay safe and dry out there, and we will see you soon.